My name is Dan Sullivan. I'm president of Down East Broadband utility up in eastern Maine. We're the first and only operating multi-town utility district in Maine. We're up and running and signing customers, and at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a quick rundown on what we've done in eastern Maine. But we're going to, today, we've got on the panel, we've got Dave Weddick from MCA, we've got Tony Reed from the Bond Bank, Carlos Mello from FAME, and a visitor coming in from Vermont, Stan Williams, who's going to wow us with what's going on over there. So I will turn it over to Dave, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Danny. So I'm David Weddick. I joined the MCA in March of this year as the CFO, as employee number 2, and we're now at 12 staff members, soon to be 13. So we've had a busy first few months for the organization, as well as, I'd say we're in the middle of startup phase, as well as doing essentially a merger with Connect Maine at the same time and taking over all of their existing programming and corresponding reporting and compliance work, which leads me on to the shameless pitch. If you know anyone in the compliance and reporting space who wants to come and have a job with me, then please let me know. There's a job description on our website either this evening or on Monday. Because we're really trying to focus on, we've been given this one-time opportunity to build something truly scalable for the future of Maine's connectivity needs, something that is being built on the fly, not just at our level, but also at the federal level. These programs are being rolled out at record speed, and we need to be, as much as we can, acting as a translator for the burden being put on us from a reporting and compliance perspective, and make that as less of a burden on you guys as possible, and be that go-between. Sometimes we won't have an answer for a question for you immediately, but we will try our best to get as many wrinkles ironed out as possible, and where we can't, we will be able to explain why the wrinkle is there. So, for example, when some of the template contracts that are going out in the next few days are going out, you'll notice they're significantly longer than they used to be with Connect Maine. That's a two-factored issue. One is that the reporting and compliance burden that's being put on us with these new funds that are being directed, and the scale of these funds is significantly higher. And number 2 is we're a quasi-state entity, whereas Connect Maine was a fully state entity. And so they basically had a bunch of clauses at the end that said, and by the way, we can kind of do anything we want at any time, and we can take our money back at the end, and which we can't do as a quasi-state. So we have to all this other legal stuff in there, which means we're trying to get them as short as possible. So I had a trip to DC 2 weeks ago for on a national scale, talking about financing and the financing needs in the sector. I took away 4 things. One was that the compliance and reporting burden of the BEAD funds, which isn't what we're deploying even now, we're deploying the ARPA funds, to the reporting and compliance burden of BEAD is only going to go significantly through higher. And if we as an organization need to sustain our projected deployment ratio of 16x, we need to be building a team that can support that. And the deployment ratio is that every year over the next 3 years, for any dollar we're spending on operational expenses each year, we're projected to deploy $16 of grants into the field. So that's what we showed in our budget and what our goal is. The second is that there is a very real national conversation on the capital needs and differing capital needs between the rural and urban areas of this country. And how, interestingly, I've seen a couple of the other more rural-focused states trying, either intentionally or unintentionally, trying to steer the conversation more towards a agriculture-focused strategic investment in the state's infrastructure, and that switching a significant chunk of the state over to sustainable ag is going to the productivity gains from smart ag, will more than recoup that investment. The third thing I took away was, sorry, just only 3 things, not 4, was that we need, as part of our broadband action planning at MCA over the next 6 months, we need to form a broadband infrastructure advisory committee to help better define a number of things. Firstly, we need to know what is the capital gap. So let's just ballpark, and these are not the real numbers. We've got, let's say, $500 million to deploy in infrastructure, last mile infrastructure in the state of Maine. Let's say the capital gap to connect everyone to last mile infrastructure is $2.5 billion. Therefore, we know that there is a $2 billion funding gap, and that there is, from an MCA perspective, we can immediately at least soft circle what our target is. We need to know that for every dollar we're putting to work in broadband infrastructure in the state of Maine is being leveraged by 4 other dollars of third capital investment. Now, the question for the committee is then, that committee would be some bankers, some bond bank folks, lawyers, people from the Municipal Association, FAME, etc. The questions for that committee would be, let's break that $2 billion down. How much of that is equity? How much of that is needed in first loss guarantees? How much of it is in straight in bonding capital? How much of that is in private debt or other forms of private debt, preferred equity? Like, what are the different flavors of capital that are going to need to be infused to fill this gap? And how do we as a state come together and truly fill all the holes that can be filled from the private markets, from the other public markets, from other state organizations? There's USDA money out there, which I think we're leaving on the table. And part of MCA's job is to figure out why and how we do that. And then the MCA, we've got $500 million, right? That we can play cleanup. We can fill in the holes in this capital stack with that remaining $500 million to make this happen. And we really think, given the amazing work of folks in the state, that we truly think we have the opportunity here to build on the work of our predecessors and reach our goal of being the best rural-focused state broadband office in the country. So we want to do that, and forming this committee is going to be able to help us meet those needs, and I look forward to working with you all to meet those goals. So pass over to Terry.
Good afternoon, Tony Reed, Maine Municipal Bond Bank. My slide, there it is. This is basically the program that we are currently using to finance municipal projects, and we're hoping at some point that broadband projects will be able to fall under this program. I'm the loan officer for the program. I've been with the bond bank for almost 13 years. The general resolution program has been around for about 50 years. Eligible borrowers are towns, cities, counties, school districts, water, sewer districts, and other governmental entities. Examples of projects are road improvements, school projects, water, sewer projects, any municipal type projects out there. We have typically 2 sales a year. We have one in the spring, one in the fall. We group all of our applications together and we sell it as one big bond sale under the bond bank's credit. We accept applications throughout the year, but there is a sales schedule when applications are due. It's usually about a 3 or 4 month sale process from beginning to end. And at the end of the sale, you'll get a wire transfer of the total amount of your project financing needs. So if you need $1 million, on the closing day, you get $1 million wired to your account to use as you wish. Interest rates are subject to current market. We go to market in the middle of the bond sale. We collect all the applications, and then we typically use that time the next month to market the bonds. And then we go to the market, sell at that current date, and then we move towards closing. So rates are pretty much estimated based upon, the magic people in the market, the underwriters, the bankers, the financial advisors, and then they're final on the day of pricing. There's no minimum or maximum loan amount. We do loans that are $50,000, and we've done $100 million loans as well. So anywhere in the middle is good. Interest costs, the bond bank pays for the cost of issuance. The only out-of-pocket cost to a municipality or a school district would be the local bond counsel. We do require a legal opinion in order to process that loan. We will not move forward with a loan without a legal opinion. So hiring a bond counsel is extremely important, not only on our end, but on your end as well. It protects you to make sure that you have all your ducks in line to legally borrow the funds, and it protects us when we go out to the market for the investors. So it's a very key and important person to have in the lineup. The sooner you get them in line, the better, especially with a broadband project. It's almost, there couldn't be a sooner person to have in your lineup than your lawyer to see which avenue you and the project want to go in, especially when we're looking at financing. Terms for a bond, typically they're anywhere between 5 and 30 years. I've done a 3-year bond as well, so we do go below 5 years, but typically they're between 5 and 30. 30 is our maximum, and the term is bound by the useful life of an asset or a project. So it's just like buying a car. You can't buy a car for 20 years. It's the useful life of the car usually. So it's the same type of thing with the bonds. We have a unique repayment schedule. There's a November 1st is our debt payment, so it's principal and interest payment every November, and then an interest-only payment in May. So those are set on a requirement of the bond banks. They're due twice a year, 30 days prior to the debt service. That's a key rating agency highlight, is that we gather all the payments prior to our bond debt payment. So it secures to make sure that we're ready to go when that debt payment is due. And like I said, the receipt of funds is wired directly to your specific account. You let us know where you want it to go, and that's where it goes on the day of the closing. And then the last is me. My contact information is right there. It's also on our website, and we'd love to hear from you if you have a project that you want us to take a look at. Typically, we invite your attorney and we invite our attorney, and we have a great discussion about the project and how we can help in that.
Can I ask 2 real quick questions?
Sure.
On that last slide.
Oh, you're going to make me go back?
What's the minimum issuance size that you guys work on, and do you just do a one-time issuance, or can they split the inflow of capital into multiple draws, or does that increase the issuance cost significantly?
So there's no minimum. The last sale we did, I had an $8 million sale. I've done $50 million sales. I've done $100 million sales.
That's in total, right?
In total, yep.
But then on a municipality basis?
It could be anywhere. Like I did $50,000 loans, and I've done, much larger. So there's no minimum or maximum amount of what you can borrow. It's all about, when we do the credit review, is if you have the capacity to pay it back. So it's, that is a process. Once you apply, we're going to do a credit review, and then I'll bring it to my board to approve. If I don't bring it to my board, then you can't afford it. So I don't usually bring loans forward to the board unless we're confident that this is somebody who we want in our pool and want to participate in. So
thank you.
You're welcome. And this is just a brief slide. It just kind of shows you where the market is currently, and this is today's world. Where does the Gen Res program fit into broadband? We're not quite sure. We're kind of learning along with you. We're bound by our general resolution and our regulations as a program, as well as the IRS rules for tax-exempt financing. So there are limits to what we can do, but that's where lawyers come involved. That's where they navigate us through that piece, the IRS piece, and what we can do within the program. So the bottom graph is just a quick 5, 10, 20, 30-year rates. That's where the market is currently. Obviously, we can do anything in between. You don't have to, you're not bound by, those increments. We've done 6, 7-year. Yeah.
So are you saying that you're not sure yet whether you can finance broadband projects?
We've done one. I did one in the previous sale. That was, to me, it was unique. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much taking broadband projects on an individual basis because everybody seems to be doing it a little differently. So we were able to process a loan with a town in the last sale, but it was a geo pledge. So it was backed by taxes, and they actually had to participate. We have a small percentage in our bond total sale that we can process as, they call it bad money, private activity money, almost like taxable money, but they get the tax exempt status, the tax exempt rates. So that's like a 3% portion of that total sale, and that's where that loan fell under because of the private activity involved in there. So it's certain instances like that. It's not a cut and dry, yes they can, no they can't. It really depends on the details. Revenue bonds. We can do a revenue bond project, but it still has limitations based on IRS regulations and the program indenture of what we can tax exempt finance for.
But would it be fair to say that you guys are excited to be able to push where that boundary is, find where that boundary is of what you can do?
We love to push boundaries.
Yeah, I mean that's the
Yeah,
impression I got is
absolutely.
that you're excited about doing that rather than
Definitely.
being dragged.
Yes, definitely. It's a, hey, give us a call, let's get everybody together and see what we can do, definitely. And with that snapshot of the interest rates, it's a huge list. What this really tells you is the history of our bond sales and where the rates were on any given year. So those rates kind of, seem high currently because the last couple of years they've been recordly low. But if you take a look over a period of time, it's not so far-fetched where the rates are currently. They're just a little higher than they have been the last, few years. So
13 years.
yeah, and then there's another page. So I went through
2008. It was
yeah.
it was higher in 2008. 14 years ago.
We got a nice 20-year history there where rates were. Like I said, we usually sell twice a year, so there's a spring and a fall sale. So, and that's my presentation. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question for you. The one broadband bond you just did, that was, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, just for.
Yeah, the one broadband bond you just did, that's us.
Right. Should be.
And we applied for, I think it was 975,000,
Right.
got 250.
Right.
And that is a real problem. That means we are going to have a real hard time doing the project.
Well, I think what the town did was, because they can only have a percentage of that private activity money from the bond sale, they capitalized, and they were the only one in the pool that was able to uniquely get that percentage. So they got the whole thing. We only borrowed $8 million for the last sale, so that percentage was really small. But we have them going into the next sale, so they'll be
Yeah.
able to, they're first in line to get that percentage of whatever that bond sale is. So
But why is it what you call bad money?
because it has a private activity piece to it.
Well, not necessarily. It's a general obligation bond.
But the reason why you're getting the revenue, it's a private entity involved in that. It's part of the tax exempt IRS rules. So that's why lawyers are involved.
It's to stop government money being raised and used to start private businesses and compete in the private market.
Actually, well, the business is going to be the town owning the infrastructure.
Right.
We're licensing it, if you like, to a private company to operate.
Right. You're
That's-
getting a franchise fee back for
But that's not
that.
different from a town building a wharf for a ferry, for example.
Right.
But,
It's a little different, but
well, why?
because you have a private activity, a private entity involved that you're getting a franchise fee back from. So It's a bunch of, I mean, I've got pages and pages of lawyer.
Yeah, I'm
It's a check mark, does it qualify for this? Does it qualify for that? And, like I said, we take each individual project separately. And you guys were able to find that niche, find that way in. So, and we're happy to have you. And
Well, yeah, it worked, but we can't afford to build the project with the amount we've got so far.
you're also participating in the
year,
next
yeah.
sale. You've already applied. That approval is carried over into the next sale. It's a year-long approval. So there's no other steps to take other than you're going to participate in the next sale and receive those bond funds then. So it is
Whole-
split up over 2 sales.
The whole amount?
It depends on what the total par amount of that bond sale is, because I only have a percentage based on the IRS regulations of what I can apply that to.
Okay, but so if that's only another 8 million, then we're back to 250,000, we still can't build the system. In other words, the bond bank's getting in the way.
In the interest of time, if we could probably get through the presentations, then we can open up
Yeah.
questions. So that, because we're under time constraints here.
Hand that over.
Thank you.
I'm not VC Fiber. So I'm Carlos Mello. I am the current CEO at the Finance Authority of Maine. So let's unpack a couple of things that have been talked about already. So one of them is that there's a $2.5 billion need to do what we need to do. What Tony was doing a great job of talking about is the front of that $2.5 billion. This is the lowest cost capital that you can get to support a project. Tax exempt, pooled at the state level, so it goes out in size and is bought by institutional investors. At the Finance Authority of Maine, we also are a bond issuer. We're what's known as a conduit bond issuer. We only do revenue bonds. We only do bad money transactions. But we're doing them one at a time, and they're associated with that underlying activity. And typically it is exactly what we're talking about, a municipal utility or something of that nature, not-for-profits, education-related. We are supporting basically tax-exempt fundraising, and we provide what's called a conduit bond. What does that mean? Conduit bond means that we give the lower rate, but all the burden of repayment exists at the issuer level. So the municipality is on the hook for that money. It may be issued by FAME, but it's the municipality or the company underlying it that has the appropriate purpose. So again, senior in the stack, what people will talk about, lower level of risk, tax exempt financing, but it's still fairly, it's upfront. So those are the two of the cheapest sources. And I know that our friends from Islesboro, I don't know if they're here today, but they went to the markets directly and raised a GO bond directly. And that's another alternative. So again, we're talking about senior money supported by the municipality. Not all municipalities have that luxury or are willing to take on that risk. So now we start unpacking, okay, what can we do behind that? Carlos is in the audience with us. He's got a great model in Georgetown. There are other models all over the state that you guys can talk about much more granularly than I ever could about how you've tried to de-risk it. The way that FAME de-risks these transactions historically is we're the guys who support the ISPs. So we've been providing capital to the Maine state ISPs for decades, both wired and wireless. So that's provided their ability to bring pieces forward. FAME's total capitalization, just make it clear to everyone. Over 40 years, the state's invested $60 million in FAME. We've been able to turn that into over $2 billion of capital deployed in the state, both debt and equity. But the point is that's over 40 years. And that's adequate to fill the $2 billion gap. And that's for all businesses. So FAME's job is to work with everyone in this room, understand how you're structuring this transaction, and seeing where we can be of help. Can we provide support for the ISPs like we've historically done? Can we provide support through issuing a conduit bond to either, directly for a specific municipality, or even better still, because we want scale, right? We have 480 municipalities in the state. If every municipality creates their own broadband district and their own broadband infrastructure, the lack of economy of scale will be profound. And Stanton's going to talk about what they're doing in Vermont to try to get at that issue. So, we can support a not-for-profit municipal bond, municipal utility that would be set up to do that. What we haven't figured out in the state is to effectively share the risk with the municipalities and the state. As I said, FAME's total capitalization is $60 million. Total. If you say that we can take 10% of that or 25% of it and support all of you out there. So we take 25% of the 60, that's 15. Multiply that by 5, because that's probably the leverage we can do to be able to do that safely. That's $75 million in support. Excuse me. It's not going to fill the hole. Not going to fill the hole. As much as I want to, it won't. And so it's really about how we leverage all of the tools. Equity, debt that Tony talked about, grants that we're receiving through all the funding that's from federal and state money, and the ability to take on risk at the local municipalities to be able to do that. Because right now, we don't have a model that a municipality can say, I'm without risk. There is none that I'm aware of. If someone's figured it out, great. And let's multiply it times 480. But I'm not aware of one.
Well placed.
Okay? So, my presentation isn't, I'm much more upbeat than the words that are coming out of my mouth. Because this is one of those things we're going to have to go at a bite at a time and try to figure them out. We've got tools, but as David said, we've got to figure out how to pull them together. Because we've got $2 billion we've got to figure out how to finance. And no one organization in the state of Maine can say, I've got $2 billion to give to you. Just no one. And so we've got to figure it out.
Yeah, and exactly what I was saying. And we need to make sure that the true risk capital that we have at the grant level is used where it ultimately really is needed, and we're playing cleanup because we can't do it by ourselves either.
So Stanton didn't pay me to make this introduction, but EC Fiber is a great model. It was a model that I would love to see if we could ever roll it out here. Folks that bootstrapped it to start, got it big enough, and then the market said, hey, I'm willing to invest in that. It stands on its own. So hopefully I said that right, Stan, and if I oversold it, I apologize.
I don't think so. I mean, it's a pretty good deal. So you're seeing EC Fiber, it's in East Central Vermont. I started working on this 15 years ago, and that's why I wore this outfit. I'll explain that later. But we started operations in 2011, and we raised $7 million from like neighborhoods until 2016, and then we accessed the revenue bond market, municipal revenue bonds. And what you guys talked about before about the private activity stuff, before you set up a contract with an ISP, make sure you have your lawyers look at it and make sure it doesn't affect any of that stuff, because it's really going to make it difficult for you to do any sort of municipal financing, whether it's general obligation or this stuff. But I mean, we've raised $62 million here, built 1,600 miles of network, have 7,500 customers, 10 million in revenues, 5 million in cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. The towns have no risk to this. These are non-recourse bonds. The only recourse the bondholders have is to the revenue from the system. And so I'll go through it, but I really think that this can fill a large portion of your capital gap if you structure the contracts with the ISPs correctly. And they can't be profit-based. There's all sorts of rules about them, but you can make them cost-based or customer-based. And GWI has a couple of these contracts already with CUDs that are starting in Vermont that meet these criteria, because all these districts, even with all the grants they're getting, you need revenue bond money to fill in the gaps of cabled areas that are considered covered and aren't subject to these grants. So this is me in 2008 wearing the exact same outfit, except these are different. I change them every 2 years. I'm trying to explain to Governor Douglas at the time about what we're doing. And, you know, they didn't take us seriously. I was Mr. Green Jeans, big joke, haha. So, you know, but 15 years later, we have figured out that, you know, now this is the way that Vermont has decided to do this across the entire state with large groups of towns. We get, ValleyNet is the operator, a nonprofit operator. We get calls all the time from single towns, and I say, we're not interested. It's crazy, it's very inefficient, and you know, you don't see any telecom operators that are doing things in single towns. They do things regionally for a reason, and that's scale. And so 31 towns is enough. And you know, by the time we raised revenue bonds, we had about 1,000 customers. So we did need some money going forward, but you guys have that now in the form of grants. We didn't have any grants. We got a little dark fiber early on, but it didn't help that much. And how do you build a district? You know, this is all the stuff about, you know, scale. There's a bunch of operators now that are starting to work with districts. We've had 30 governing board members that have attended meetings once a month for 15 years. I can't, untold thousands of hours of boring meetings that people have sat through, and it's worked. And we didn't go the general obligation bond route because we would never have gotten the vote in towns. Most of these towns have a cable-centered area where half the population lives. Those people aren't going to vote for general obligation bonds. So we skipped it, and this avoids that. And you know, so the other reason to do this is you get economies of scale. We got the town of Granville, which has about 5 homes per mile, and we got Hartford, which has 35. Hartford's cabled, but anyway, having all these towns together gets you an average that's sufficient to you know, and this is why it works. So we've got, you know, 13% of the state, and let's see, there's we didn't get my most recent, you know, map I stuck in, but anyway, that's only part of the state. Every part of the state now has a district. I think there's 9. There's a couple blanks, and that's usually the independent phone operators that have done a decent job of going from high-quality DSL to fiber. But every town in the state has joined one of these, and they're all functioning. You know, ValleyNet's the nonprofit. We have a very simple contract. It was like $10 per customer per year that we get paid, so it's not very much money, and it meets the private activity rules. So we're able to issue these revenue bonds, which are for the borrower, or for the owner. They're tax-free, state and federal. So you know, it's a pretty good rate of return. It's 4, 5, 6% tax-free. And as you said, we bootstrapped it. 2015, we hit about 1,200 customers, positive EBITDA. That allowed us to go to the municipal revenue bond market, pay back the original bondholders, who were not happy because they were getting 7.5% tax-free, and it's hard to get that. And since then, we've raised, you know, a total of $62 million. I think we'll do another $7 million this year, and we're pretty much done with. We should get $10 million in grants from the states. Finally, and you know, it's been a long road. You know, our build cost is up to $45,000 per mile incrementally going forward, but early on, before the inflation stuff hit, we were able to build for $30,000 per mile in rural areas and get about 5 customers. We did not do video because it's a money-losing business, and it's all changed with streaming. anyway, even phone right now is just kind of a lost leader. I mean, you have to have it to get people to switch over, but there's so much VoIP calling or calling on your phone that's not necessary. We have three tiers. Our lowest revenue is $72, which people say is really expensive. It's not, I mean, I think Fidium is less because they're skimming the cream of the crop like all the cable guys do. Once you get through with their early promotions, 72 is pretty good. We're trying to get it lower. And here's the details. It's not secured by taxpayers or the general fund. It has no impact on the town's credit rating. We've borrowed at 6.1% earlier when we were smaller. Our latest borrowing at the end of 2020, before the rates jumped, was 4.4. I think this year we'll probably be back up to 6, but we are going to get a bond rating that's close to investment grade, which is going to reduce our interest rate. Talk about, compliance. There is no compliance. If you meet your 1.25 times debt service covenant, you can do what you want with the money. You can burn it as long as you meet that covenant. And so the very little bureaucracy involved with this. We did get RDOF funding. I think we've spent more complying with it than we've actually received so far. Total pain in the butt. But anyway.
Hey, Stan, how do you get 3 years of audited financials if you're a new organization?
You probably can't issue with these bonds in the first year, but you can get started with grants and stuff, and then you lead up to it. You might be able to get away with 2. I mean, 3 isn't like a absolute number, but that's sort of what they're looking for. And what they really want to see is positive EBITDA and sort of very steady. You want to look like a utility every year. There's just no surprises. So our margins have been increasing steadily for 10 years. And the grant funding that you guys get will look like equity to the revenue bond market. We didn't have any grant funding, so we're all bonds. We're all debt, apart from a dark fiber piece. So that's it. And I think if you structure things right correctly, you can raise a lot of money in this market as long as you adhere to those covenants. Just make sure that your contract with the ISP is correct before you go try to issue bonds, not after.
All right. I will try to run through ours as quickly as possible in the interest of time. I guess the green one. No, that's not me. Blank slate right there.
There we go.
Well, that isn't me either. Well, I can just wing this. My name is Dan Sullivan. I'm the president of Down East Broadband. We're the only multi-town public utility in the state of Maine right now. Broadband connectivity. We're in 6 towns. 4 of them are actively signing on customers. We've passed our sweet spot, our take rate piece that we're needed in order to make this all sing. One of our biggest issues right now is certainly not a lack of demand. It is a lack of being able to get the workforce out there to hook people up. We're presently looking at close to 500 customers waiting to come on, and we can't get them connected to it as quick as we'd like to. We're working with a great partner, Pioneer, who's working on that issue, going to try to make this better by working with the vocational schools and to get some more workers out there. But we basically didn't have any option for grant money. We came at Andrew at MCA crossing our fingers and hoping, but when he let us know that existing debt does not get picked up, we had to go another route. But the demand for this service was so high in our communities, and we had to face the cable companies. We had to face Consolidated. They were there. We initially talked to them first. That's the first thing we did is we went to Time Warner at the time, and we went to Consolidated and said, will you put fiber to the home in all these homes? They said, we can't do it. We can't make any money at it. I said, we got it. We'll go borrow some money. How much do you need for us to do this? And they turned us flat down, so they wouldn't do it. So we went back to the towns where the desire was incredible. And the towns, we had almost universal, let's do this thing. Once we did the numbers and realized we could make this work, we weren't worried about take rates. We weren't worried about it at all. We're still not worried about it because the demand is so strong for this type of service. We ended up working with Pioneer, and we built what's referred to as a home run network. We talked about this in one of the earlier sessions. A lot of these towns, we've been reinventing this wheel forever. We start out with dial-up, then we went to wireless, then we went to fixed wireless, and we go to cable, then we go to satellite. I mean, we've invented this. I started this, my mission here 12 years ago, trying to do fiber to the home in every place in Maine. That's what we need to do in order to get this done once and for all. You talk about, somebody in an earlier session talked about upgrades and what has to happen as technology changes. The network that we built in these towns, and we're continuing to build, is a single fiber is going to every person who wants it. So we've got a dedicated connection going to every person who's going to get on this network. As the technology changes and things get faster and faster, which they will, our ISPs just have to change the equipment in the cabinets. Those existing cables up on the poles, they're not going anywhere. 50, 60, 70 years, that's going to be it. So when we explained that to these towns and said, you're not going to reinvent this wheel, we're going to do this once, they were all over it. So the way we finance this, because this is a money thing, is we got the towns to secure the notes. They're not on the hook to pay it. They're on the hook to pay it if we fail. But we were able to demonstrate the towns the take rate we knew we would get, and we have gotten it. They were not worried about that happening. So when we go to these small town meetings, as Tim can tell you, it's small towns in Maine historically don't like to work together. Everybody has their own issue. We set up what's called an interlocal agreement with all these towns, where we got them in a room, and we actually are competing basketball team towns that can sit in a room and can actually get something done. Our board consists of, as we bring a town on, board has, each town gets to put a select person or someone they nominate on the board. So they're in on all decisions. Our meetings are all wide open to the public. So everything is transparent. It's our note and the infrastructure cost plus the maintenance and all that other sort of stuff that goes with this is paid by the subscribers. So when somebody buys the service, you pay $60 a month to an ISP for your 100 by 100 connection. A chunk of that comes back to DBU. We then pay the debts of all the towns. So because of this interlocal agreement, one town may have 75 customers. Another town may have 450 customers. We're all working together so that all of this revenue coming in is going to pay all the debt for all the towns. When this is done, when the debt is paid, and we've saved for maintenance and upgrades and all that kind of stuff, this is a revenue stream. This money is still coming in. It's not going to shut off. We have one instance where, and this is why we wish we would have had grants. We want more now. We have one particular group right now that is 100% funded. It's all grants. A group of people, it's 100% paid for, which means that the revenue coming in from that one comes into DBU, which helps pay the debt of the towns that had to take debt or had to secure debt. So the more towns we bring into this, with grant money added to it, this makes this model gets sweeter and sweeter all the way down the pike. We just wrote a grant for the town I live in. I live in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And we put a grant in to connect me for 2/3 of the cost of the build, and we got it. That town is going to join DBU. We're going to start producing money into the stream, into the revenue to help all these towns that didn't get grants. So it's really important to us, and I'm going to end here because I'm like Mark Willett, I can keep talking until somebody tells me to shut up. We are very interested in adding as many towns we can, and we're running off, I think you mentioned this, Carlos, we're running into this mess actually with this RDOF funding, which is an absolute nightmare to small town America. What's happened is in towns in these little rural areas in Maine and across the country is that the big incumbents have secured sections of the town with rural digital opportunity funding, federal funding. Well, you can't have overlapping federal revenue streams in the same area. So these RDOF recipients are able to take up to 10 years in order to build. So they've basically hamstrung these little towns to be able to join into the MCA bunch here so we can borrow money for them and build a network that we can get done in 2 years. And what it adds insult to injury, at the end of the 8th, 9th moment, they could say, we're not going to bother doing this one. And they get away with it. We're trying to change it on the federal level. It's probably a mountain that nobody can climb. But it's something that needs to be exposed out there because it really hinders these small towns. We have one, I'll tell this last number, we have one town who worked diligently to try to get an MCA grant. And they went to a company, and the company went out and said, we can do that build for $890,000. Great. They went to a competing incumbent that's been there for years. Their cost came back at $2.2 million for the same exact network. And that incumbent already has fiber in that town as a result of the CAF 2 money they got about 5-6 years ago, which is your money. So they've already got fiber within 3 miles of almost every home in that town. And they say it's going to cost $2.2 million, and when a guy who has no fiber there can do it for less than $1 million. So it's that kind of inequity that a lot of these little towns, I do this a lot, and I run into this a lot with these small towns that are trying to figure this out. These are the kind of roadblocks they run into. And we got to find a way to fix it. That's your job there, Dave, so just in case.
Sure.
I will turn up for questions. We did go over, so we'll have to decide how this, I don't know if Benny's run, if Miles is around, but if there's questions out there, let them have it. Shoot.
Yeah, I have a question about unorganized territories.
Okay.
Are we toast?
No, you're not. Actually, that's an excellent question, because the unorganized territories you're available for the ARPA funding, which is going at the county level. In Washington County, where we're from, they've got $6.1 million that's out there to help unorganized territories. So you need to be at your county commissioners' meetings and be in the middle of that mix to make sure that, in our case, our commissioners are thinking of building a jail. That's what they want to do with it. They can't, but that's what they want to do with it. But there's funding out there for TIF areas that definitely you could take advantage of.
Well, I could use your help with Hancock County, but that's another story. But I'm assuming the Municipal Bond Bank can't deal with unorganized territories because you are us, literally, right?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but I'd be willing to take a look at that.
And to work with FAME, we'd have to form a corporation and set up to, basically issue bonds through that
Right.
mechanism.
It would be typically it's a not-for-profit, so that you can fit under the tax-exempt status of the code, but yeah.
Right.
A not-for-profit utility would be the traditional way to do it.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Probably going to regret saying who I am, but I'm a county administrator. So I can tell you that for the unorganized, the counties would be the ones to talk to, and we are eligible to apply to the bond bank on behalf of the unorganized.
I think I saw, I'll go.
You got you running.
Not so much a question as an observation. You talk about economies of scale and banding together with other communities. That implies that you have other communities around you that are grouping together that want to have you. If you can't make a connection, what do you do? Now, I'm really at this point in no position to complain because of where our town is at. But prior, we talked to 2 different groupings of communities and basically got the cold shoulder. So that's just an observation.
Just a point of information for the MCA staff as you look forward to applications coming in. As an RDOF recipient, I'm well aware of what RDOF means from a federal standpoint. There is 5% of all the awarded service addresses that I don't have to serve, and I'll still get my support money. So I think it would be good if there were a way to consider some of these applications that are coming in and look at the 3-year window that RDOF recipients have to build their network out. And if the towns, say Charlotte, for example, doesn't get their RDOF build from the incumbent, that they have a chance to go back to their application and get their money to do their build. If there's some way to make a stipulation, because RDOF says we have to build the network in 6 years, and 40% of it has to be built in 3 years. So there are some metrics there that can be seen. It's a shame that some of these places are going out and doing an application and they just flat out can't get a grant because somebody says they might build something. 5% of 40,000 is a very, very large number compared to a town like Charlotte. So just a point of information.
Noted, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to come up here, but they'll be here for the summit reception. So if you have follow-up questions, you can either ask them or come to someone with a blue star on their name tag, and we can pass the question along.
So is there anything that the state legislature can do about the lack of funding that FAME has on this question?
I'd love to have more. So anything
Well,
that
I
you
mean,
can
let's
do.
think creatively, really. I mean, we have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Right.
And I think the legislature's very motivated. I mean, you know, it's obviously legislator by legislator.
So the need in the state is profound right now. So every dollar that can be supported, we can deploy. It's a question of priorities. And, you know, housing is a huge priority in the state. We know that that's pulling on that, but we are willing and glad to support in any way we can. If we can get more funding, we can do more.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all.
everyone. Let's give a round of applause.